All right, we're going to dive into some sleep data that reveals a pattern so surprising it might just make you look at your own habits a little differently. But here's the kicker, the real story isn't just about sleep, it's about how the tools we use can totally change what the data seems to be telling us.
So, let me ask you something. When do you think most people get more sleep? During the busy work week or on the weekend? I mean, the answer seems pretty obvious, right? Weekends are for catching up on sleep. That's what we all think.
But what if I told you that's not what the data said? In fact, in this one analysis, this number just jumped off the page, 88%. I mean, that's a massive majority.
Yep, you heard that right. 88% of people in this dataset reported sleeping longer on weeknights, not weekends, weeknights. It just feels wrong, doesn't it? It's completely backward. And that is the mystery we're going to try and solve today.
Okay, so how on earth do you explain something like that? A trend that just completely defies what we all think is common sense. Well, to figure this out, we can't just stare at that final number. We've got to dig in and see how we even got there in the first place.
And that means we need to pop the hood and look inside the analyst's toolkit. Because here's the secret. The story data tells you it often depends entirely on the tools you use to ask it questions. It really is all about perspective.
So let's do that. Let's look at this toolkit. I want you to think of every statistical method as a different kind of lens, like for a camera. Each one is designed to bring a very specific kind of pattern into focus. And picking the right one, well, that's everything. All right, to really get this, we have to talk about something called scale data. It sounds technical, but it's super simple. It's just data where the gaps between the numbers are consistent, and they actually mean something. Like, think about your height in centimeters. The difference between 170 and 171 centimeters is exactly the same as the gap between 180 and 181. It's a nice, clean, fixed unit of measurement. And this is exactly why this matters. See, a super common tool called a Pearson correlation is built for that clean scale data. It's laser-focused on finding these perfect straight-line relationships. But what if your data isn't like that? Think about the finishing places in a race. First and second place might be a split second apart, but third place could be like a whole minute behind. The gaps aren't even. That's where a different tool, Spearman's correlation, becomes the hero. It basically ignores those messy gaps and just looks for a consistent trend, Like, is one thing generally going up as the other goes up, even if it's not a perfect straight line?
And listen, this isn't just some boring textbook theory. In the very analysis we're talking about, one of the variables had a correlation number that was wildly different depending on which test they used. I mean, Pearson said one thing and Spearman said something else entirely. That's a massive red flag. It's the data screaming at you, hey, this isn't a simple straight-line relationship. And it shows how easy it is to get the wrong answer if you use the wrong tool.
Really, it all boils down to this. The original analyst put it perfectly. They said, it just shows plain as day that the lens you use matters. It's that simple. You can get completely different results just by changing the lens. Okay, so the investigation didn't stop there. It wasn't just about how long people slept. They also wanted to know, is there a difference in sleep quality between men and women? And to answer that question, you guessed it, they needed a totally different kind of lens from their toolkit. So they grabbed a tool called the Mann-Whitney U-test. It sounds complicated, but it's just the perfect thing for comparing two groups when the data's a little messy. And the result? Boom! It found a statistically significant difference. Okay, I know that's a phrase we hear all the time, but what does it actually mean? Well, all it really means is that the result they found probably isn't a fluke. It's not just random chance or weird coincidence. The test is basically saying, hey, the difference you're seeing between these two groups, it's very likely a real thing, a genuine pattern in your data.
And to put some numbers on it, the median sleep quality score for males came out to 138.42. For females, it was 125.0. It's that gap between the two numbers that the test flagged as being real, not just some random noise.
Okay, so we've seen how picking different tools, different lenses, can help you find completely different things in the exact same pile of data. So now, let's take that idea and use it to finally crack our big mystery. Let's circle all the way back to that mind-bending 88% number. Why would so many people sleep more on weeknights? Now that we have a bit more respect for how this analysis is done, what could possibly be the real-world reason for a trend like this? The data is practically begging us to think a little deeper here.
Well, a few pretty interesting ideas have been floated. One is this idea of forced consistency. Your rigid weekday schedule, work, school, whatever, it forces you into a regular bedtime, and maybe that adds up to more sleep. Then there's weekend disruption. You stay out late, maybe have a few drinks, so even if you sleep in, the actual quality of your sleep might be a lot worse. Or here's a fun one, maybe we're all just so sleep-deprived from our weekends that we spend the whole week desperately trying to catch up.
Yeah, this chart really shows you just how dominant that 88% pattern is. But, and this is super important, look at the other slice. That's the 12% who didn't follow the trend. Plus, there were over 100 people who slept the exact same amount. It's such a great reminder that even when you find a really strong trend, people are complicated. There's never just one story.
So here's the big takeaway, the thing I really want you to remember. The story wasn't just sitting there in the data, waiting for someone to find it. No. The choice of the tool, the choice of the lens, and how you carefully interpret what you see, that's what actually shapes the whole narrative. And this all leads to something you can actually use. The next time you're reading an article or you see some new study with a flashy headline, what are the smart questions you should be asking yourself? How can you look at it with a more critical eye?
Honestly, it boils down to two really simple questions. First, what kind of data is this, really? Is it clean and measurable like a ruler, or is it more like rankings in a competition? And second, what were they actually looking for? A perfect straight line connection, or just a general it kind of goes up trend? Just asking those two things helps you understand the lens they used, and that changes everything. Because at the end of the day, this is what it's all about. The tools we choose to analyze data aren't just passive observers. They don't just find the story. They are active partners in writing it.
So I'll leave you with this to chew on. If that 88% pattern is a real reflection of our lives, what does that say about us? I mean, what is it about our work culture, our social lives, the very rhythm of our modern world that could be driving this totally bizarre sleep pattern? It's a little unsettling when you think about it, right? Definitely something to think about.